Tigers and Gators. We've got your final preview and prediction. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. It's LSU in Florida. It's a renewal of a great SEC rivalry, one that on an annual basis probably will be going away starting in 2026. It's not to say these two teams won't play in 26. It's just to say with the league going to a 9-game SEC schedule, LSU and Florida likely are not going to be permanent opponents. So for two teams that have played annually now for a half a century, this annual rivalry is probably going to be a little more few and far between. So they have played every year starting with after a break from let's see, it was from 1967 to 71. They took a break in 68, 69, 70. Then every year since 1971, these two teams have played. So they've had some dramatic moments, of course, with some great football teams as well. The teams volleying national championships, so 6, 7, 8. There was the great win at home in 07, tearing down the goalpost in 1997. 50 years ago, the great Charles Alexander and LSU blew the doors off ninth-ranked Florida in Tiger Stadium. That's notable, of course, because this Saturday in Tiger Stadium, Alexander the Great's number 4 will join Billy Cannon's number 20, Jerry Stovall's number 21, and Tommy Casanova's number 37 as retired jerseys in the history of the program. So much great history, great moments, great memories with LSU and Florida. Two teams coming into this game with very different feelings about them. LSU is ranked 3rd in the country. They have arguably the most impressive win in the country so far, the season-opening win at Clemson. Sluggish a week ago, but still everyone looks at LSU and realizes everything they have in front of them, which is everything. On the flip side, Florida's coming off a loss to South Florida, and the seat has never been hotter for Billy Napier. And with the stretch ahead with LSU, Miami, Texas A&M, that's not even to mention you still got games ahead with Georgia and Tennessee and Florida State. The challenges there for Billy Napier to keep his head above water, to get above 500 this season are sincere. And he's a guy who's very much coaching for his job, and their team is fighting for whatever they need. Because if you get a second loss hung on you in September, you have to be flawless the rest of the way. If you want to be a playoff team, you can't lose another game the rest of the way and be a playoff team. So that's the challenge that Billy Napier and the Gators have, and what a challenge it is coming into Baton Rouge. Now, the story we followed all week is LSU center Braylon Moore. I think we all understand Trey'Dez Green, sprained MCL, is doubtful, is unlikely to play on Saturday. Best information I have, he won't play this week. It's unlikely he would play next week against Southeastern. The target would have him back against Ole Miss in 2 weeks in Oxford. That's something we've told you about since Sunday. If you're an everydayer and you listen, thank you sincerely for that. With Braylon Moore, it's been a little bit more of an ebb and flow. Let me kind of remind you how the week has gone. Okay, so I'm going to do this intentionally so you can feel when I play these cuts for you sequentially how it's ebbed and flowed this week. Okay, so on Saturday night, I was told Braylon Moore, high ankle, probably going to miss a game or two. Sunday morning, had that reaffirmed to me. Monday, Brian Kelly goes into his press conference and says this.
MRIs, were positive. We didn't get the true sense that we have a high ankle sprain with Braylon. There was nothing that gave us that sense that when we looked at the MRI that, hey, this is a tightrope procedure and he's going to be out for, 4 weeks. He's going to be day to day. We'll get him out there tomorrow. We'll see how he feels. He felt better today. So I think we're going to list him as questionable and that.
Okay, so questionable on Monday. They were going to get him out there, see if he can move around. Not feeling great, but better on Monday than he did on Sunday and so forth. So then he practices on Tuesday, and Brian Kelly confirms that. So on so that was Monday. On Wednesday morning, Brian Kelly's on the SEC coaches teleconference, remember, and says this.
I think we have him listed as probable. He did practice yesterday, and we expect him to practice today. I think we have him listed as probable.
So, again, right there, he went from questionable on Monday to probable Wednesday morning. Well, when the actual injury report came out Wednesday night, he was questionable. So unsure on Monday morning, he'll be questionable. So he could do Wednesday morning, probable. Wednesday after practice, questionable on the official injury report. And I told you that some of the conversations I had after Wednesday's practice was that, man, look, he's out there, but it doesn't look great. And so he was questionable. Well, then Thursday after practice, and this is the last media availability that Brian Kelly has in the week. Thursday after practice, Brian Kelly gives this update on Trey'Dez Green and Braylon Moore.
Trey'Dez was out on the field today, catching balls, moving around. He's going to be probably a game-time decision. He's not where we need him to be today, but we still have some time. Braylon took all the reps today with the first team. He's ready to go, and I think we're going to list him. If not, I think he's probable, right?
So you have seen this ebb and flow throughout the week. The training staff at LSU is incredible. I have no doubt that Jack Marucci, that whole staff, they've done great work this week to get Braylon Moore in as good a position as he can to play. I'll voice this concern that I have again. I don't doubt that they can tape that thing up. They can give him an injection, make the pain go away for an evening, or for hopefully as much of the evening as possible, and let him get out there and try to give it a go. And I understand the necessity of winning this game and understanding next week you don't need him against Southeastern. The thing that I fear, the concern I have, is what if he re-aggravates it? Like, what if he makes it worse? And if he makes it worse, does it set him back? And now you're talking about a longer time without Braylon Moore than you would have had if you just sat him this week and gave him the opportunity. So none of us knows until they get out there Saturday and play and see how it all goes. My hope for Braylon Moore is it goes awesome and that he looks the part, plays great, and LSU goes and beats Florida, and then no setbacks. Maybe if you need to rest him next week, you do. Then he's ready to roll against Ole Miss. Then you get an open date after that. So we'll continue to follow it, how it goes. Now, on the other side of the line of scrimmage, what we do know is that Caleb Banks is going to make his season debut. And Caleb Banks is awesome. We've talked about him here. He's a giant. He's 6'6", 330 pounds. He was a game wrecker last year. He had a sack at TFL, had a handful of pressures on Garrett Nussmeier. He forced two fumbles. He forced the fumble on Garrett Nussmeier, and then on one play where Emory Jones picked up a fumble and was running, Caleb Banks annihilated Emory Jones and forced a fumble there. So he had two forced fumbles alone in that game. So this is a big piece. He had off-season foot surgery, has not played in the first two games, but is going to play this week. And Brian Kelly knows the challenge with identifying where 88 is.
He's a really good player. He's physical. He certainly was disruptive for us. So we're aware of him. We know that, similar to Woods at Clemson, these guys have to be, blocked and sometimes double teamed. So we're quite aware of him, know he's going to play, and we'll have to be up for the task.
One of the things that's worth noting, as Brian Kelly mentioned, Peter Woods there from Clemson. Peter Woods against LSU was one of the ones. Parker and Woods were the two guys, the two All-Americans, the two projected first-round draft picks that that LSU had to face in that season opener against Clemson. And both of those guys, neither of them really made a lot of hay against LSU in that football game. As you look at the Clemson defensive grades and how that all played out, Parker graded well at a 75, but only had one tackle in that game, one solo tackle, two totals in that game. When you look at Peter Woods, forgive me, I'm scrolling way down to see where he even graded out here. There's Peter Woods. He graded out at 69.5. He had two assisted tackles. That was it. I mean, those two guys combined for 4 total tackles, and 3 of them were assisted tackles. So LSU identified where those guys were and avoided them successfully. They had time to game plan to avoid those guys and did so successfully. Do you have that same luxury this week, knowing you're going to have Caleb Banks there on the line of scrimmage, and you're going to have Tyreek Sapp at one defensive end? Those are two guys that were largely responsible for wrecking your day offensively in Gainesville a year ago. Can you do in the game plan this week similar to what you did in the opener against Clemson to make sure you account for those two guys and don't let them beat you? It's a little different than when you're in a game and you have some type of injury. Now, the other thing about Banks, it's worth noting, is last year, Banks was in the B gap for 52 of his snaps. And that means he was basically on the guard. And the guards that he was on last year were Miles Frazier at right guard and Paul Mabenga at left guard. Now, Paul Mabenga had a really, really rough day a year ago in that game against Florida. Against Florida, Paul Mabenga graded out at a 45.8. His run blocking grade was a 45.2. His pass blocking grade was a 33.3. It was a really rough day for Paul Mabenga in that game against Florida. He allowed 6 hurries and 8 pressures. Let me say that again slowly for you. In that game against Florida a year ago, Paul Mabenga at left guard allowed 6 hurries and 8 pressures. So I don't doubt at all that Brian Kelly is wanting Braylon Moore in there to give some support to Paul Mabenga, because last year your center guard combo was DJ Chester, Paul Mabenga, and you had Caleb Banks wrecking stuff over there. I'm sure that's one of the giant reasons why they want Braylon Moore in there for this game. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But I will also say, Paul Mabenga has improved at the start of this season. We've gone through his PFF numbers. If you just specifically look at that Clemson grade, considering what I just told you, a grade in the overall grade in the 40s last year against Florida, this year against Clemson, his overall grade was a 53. Run blocking grade was not good, but his pass block grade was an 81 against Clemson. His pass blocking grade against Tech was an 80.7. So maybe the lesson here is don't run behind Paul Mabenga, but understand he's in a much better position to help you pass block this year. And Brian Kelly did discuss on Thursday Mabenga's improvement.
I think first and foremost, he's assignment correct. He's really reliable. You can trust him that he's going to do the right things. He moves his feet very well. And I think more than anything else, it's just continue to, work, staying low, playing with better pads. He has a tendency to rise up a little bit. And I thought he had a great week. And the combination of him and Cohen Eccles, I think, puts us in a really good position at that guard position.
Cohen Eccles, when he rotates in there at left guard, he's going to be giving up about 50 pounds to Caleb Banks. That's going to be one to watch. A young guy in Eccles who is strong and plays with great leverage and great technique, but is going to be undersized against a giant like Caleb Banks. It's just something worth watching. It's the thing, actually, worth watching as LSU and Florida kick off. That LSU offensive line against that Florida defensive front, that is the matchup to watch in this game. So how much of an impact will that have? I'll give you my final thoughts on this game and a prediction as we continue here. Locked on LSU, your team every day. You can just move through life, or you can find things that move you. You can choose to get out there. Choose your people. You can choose to go for it. Like, really, go for it. Just choose to do something that moves you. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. Mazda, move and be moved. And we're also brought to you by DoorDash. Y'all, your football weekend is here. You better get that DoorDash app. It's time to look back, crown this week's MVP. Who delivered? Powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most, and let's break it down. We've told you all week about Barry Brown, the great game that he had offensively for LSU against Louisiana Tech. So many great performers defensively. You can give it to the entire LSU defense, as the starters didn't allow Louisiana Tech to score a single point. They only scored once on a busted coverage late in the game when the reserves were in. When the pressure was on, the LSU defense was there. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, you know that is a hallmark of this LSU defense. And just like the LSU defense delivered, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you can save every Saturday that you order. So stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. Brian Kelly was asked about Florida coming in as a desperate team off the loss against South Florida. Thought his answer was interesting about how you combat a team that's going to be sky high like that.
It's not just being a great guy. If you out-execute anybody that's desperate, the guy that out-executes wins over the guy that's desperate. That doesn't win games. What wins games is execution. And so that's why I say to you today, like today was important to me that our details needed to be in place. Like, be detailed. You know what the opponent's going to be. They're going to come in knowing that they need to win. That's not what we're doing. We're going out to out-execute our opponent and, play with poise, composure, right? Compete our tails off for 4 quarters every single play. And look, at the end of the day, the teams that out-execute each other, all that other stuff kind of goes away.
Florida through 2 games, it's interesting because you don't have a very large sample size, right? They've just played a couple of games. They scored 55 against Long Island, and then they scored 16 against South Florida. So when you look at Florida averaging 236 pass yards, 166 rush yards, scoring over 50 in their opener, allowing just 8 points per game. They shut out Long Island, gave up 16 to South Florida. It's fair to look and say, okay, what's real and what's fake? Well, only whenever you play a game like this will you really start to determine that. LSU exists on the other side of that spectrum where you've already played a game against Clemson. So you didn't have the Long Island excuse me, there's a siren going on behind me. My apologies. You didn't have the Long Island correlation on LSU schedule next week. That'll come next week when LSU plays Southeastern Louisiana. You'll play an FCS school. In theory, LSU should put up a big day offensively, and that'll tilt the stats in their way. So it's why it doesn't really do you any good to look at the conference or national statistics through just 2 weeks, especially when LSU's played a game more difficult than most anyone in the country already has. So I think the bigger takeaway is not what Florida did against Long Island, which you would anticipate. It's what they weren't able to do against South Florida, which is move the ball and finish drives. Florida lost that game 18-16 against South Florida. That it was an uncharacteristic errant snap on a punt from one of the best long snappers in the country that proved to be the difference in a 2-point game. Now, South Florida, Grammatica did kick the game-winning field goal there with no time after the penalty that we learned. But when you look at that 18-16 game against South Florida, and that was in Gainesville, this was a game where Florida did move the football. I mean, Florida put up 355 yards of offense, but that defense gave up 391. Lagway threw for 222. South Florida threw for 263. Florida ran for 133, but South Florida ran for 128. It is fair to look and say, if South Florida was able to put up 400 yards of offense against Florida and run it for 128 yards at a 4.4 yard per carry clip, shouldn't LSU on their home field be able to at least match what South Florida did? And if they do, then I think LSU will win this game and win this game handily. I think the real question is, is obviously LSU at the line of scrimmage. When you turn it over and it's the LSU defense against that Florida offense, this is where I think LSU just has a monumental advantage. We've talked all week about DJ Lagway, missing spring, missing fall camp. He's only been back out there for less than a month now. He's there for 1 week before they got into game week against Long Island. He battled the shoulder injury, the calf injury that's still bothering him as he's wearing a sleeve. It's obvious that he's not healthy and fully right, and he doesn't have necessarily the great weapons on the outside like we've seen great Florida teams in the past have. That is not a great recipe to come into Baton Rouge for a night game with a crowd that's going to be sauced against an LSU defense, which is the best here in a decade, that's playing like the best defense in college football. It's why, I look at this game and the total, if you sports bet, opened at 51. It has now been bet down here to 46.5 as we record this on Friday afternoon. So when you look at that, that's a 5-point movement, which is massive. Odds makers don't miss by 5 points. Seismic things happen when starters are missing. For example, the New Orleans Saints this week are going to play the San Francisco 49ers. That line opened with the Niners as a touchdown favorite in New Orleans. Brock Purdy's not going to play. That line's now down to 3.5. So that's moved 3.5 points because a starting quarterback isn't there. This is a college game that's seen the total be bet down 5 points. That's because I don't think the odds makers yet have quite figured out how good LSU's defense is. And this has been a point that I've made a lot. It is difficult to account for the transfer portal. I don't think all the metrics have quite figured that out. You look at returning production metrics and things like that, and LSU doesn't have a ton of returning production. But when you go add the level of experienced players from Power 4 schools, Patrick Payton, Jack Pyburn, Mansour Delane, AJ Halsey, it made LSU's defense dramatically better than they were a year ago. And you get Harold Perkins back and weeks back, and you all know the drill. Against a struggling Florida offense, I think points are going to be very difficult to come by for Florida. So the question is, I fully expect the LSU defense to be outstanding. The question is, can the offense control the football, move the football, finish drives and score points, and force Florida's offense to be more aggressive against a really aggressive LSU defense? If that's the case, then Florida is not playing the type of game they need to play. Florida's going to need to play a game like they played against South Florida. Not with the mistakes. I mean, they're going to have to play a low-scoring game that stays within a touchdown, a field goal, where they can muddy it up, muck it up, hope to force a turnover, make a play, and get a short field, try to kick a game-winning field goal, something along those lines. I think that's Florida's path to win. For what it's worth, if you're thinking special teams, Trey Smack is Florida's kicker. He has missed a couple of times this year already from inside of 40 yards. Once from inside of 40 and once from 40 plus, but inside of 50. So he's a really good kicker with a very strong leg. He can make them from 50 plus, but he's missed a couple of times already this year. So, you can maybe, if you're going to be in that number, you can make it difficult for Florida and for their special teams with Trey Smack, who's a great kicker, but has had some struggles here in the early going. Of course, for LSU, we all trust Damian Ramos, and then keep an eye, my goodness, on Berrien Brown and Xavier Thomas in the return game, who might be able to flip the field and give the Tigers a great short field scoring opportunity in this game, where I do think the defenses are going to dominate. As I look at this football game, I think this is almost a carbon copy of what you'd expected stylistically from LSU and Clemson. I said from the beginning, my thought on that game, my play was to the under. I liked Clemson because they were at home, most veteran returning team in college football against an LSU team with a lot of new. I told you if that was week 2, week 3, or a neutral site or in Baton Rouge, I would have picked LSU. But the way the game played out is what I expected. I had a heavy play to the under, as we talked about all throughout the offseason. I still don't believe the odds makers have figured out just how good this LSU defense is, and that's why you're seeing some inflated numbers. I think this is a low-scoring game because I think Brian Kelly and Joe Sloan know they don't have to go out there and be super aggressive to go try to score 40 in this game. I think they know Florida's offense is struggling to find their identity. I think LSU knows they've got a loaded gun defensively, and they're going to be able to suffocate this Florida offense throughout the day. And what they need to make sure they do is play a clean, consistent game, an error-free game against Florida offensively. And if LSU is able to do that, then they're going to put up enough on the board to give themselves enough distance to where it's like the big brother with his hand on the little brother's head while the little brother's like swinging their arm trying to get, they just can never get close enough to do it. I think that's the type of game that we're going to expect Saturday in Tiger Stadium. I do like LSU to win it. I've got it 24-14. I think it is a play to the under in this game. Again, I think it's a low-scoring game, but a game where LSU makes sure that they don't make the mistake to get them beat and ultimately does enough offensively to get by and get out of Baton Rouge with a win, to get to 3-0 before you have a breather next week against Southeastern. Then you hit the road in conference play for the first time to head to Ole Miss 2 weeks from Saturday. So that's how I'll call it. LSU 24, Florida 14. We will be here when the game ends on Saturday. We'll do our post-game show, the 30-minute standard post-game show. So you'll have that for you Saturday night after LSU in Florida. So make sure you come back here. Hey, thanks so much for being here every single day. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.